Hey Raptors, what's up? Mr. Lassiter with you. And for sixth period, I didn't get exactly done with the lecture today, so I'm going to finish it up in this video. So again, today we looked at similarities between the English and French colonies in the Americas to Spain and Portugal. We looked at their differences, and we looked at the English colonies, notably English experiments that did not work, the southern colonies where we see the use of slavery and indentured servitude first, and then slavery, the growth of cash crops, the fur trade giving rise in the Carolinas to the growth of cash crops. We also looked at kind of how the society was fairly hierarchical. In New England, we don't see that same hierarchy develop. Instead, we see kind of a different social order develop, and partially because they're going to have a different economic system. So we saw the Pilgrims come over in 1620. The Puritans set up the Massachusetts Bay Joint Stock Company in 1630. And that colony had a fairly normal gender balance, unlike what we see with Roanoke or Jamestown. And we see political institutions which have an elected governor, and like we see in Virginia, a lower legislative house. As far as the economy in New England, they did not grow cash crops, mainly because there was very poor soil and the climate did not allow for such a long growing season. So instead we see an economy which originally is dependent on fur, forest products, and fish, but then it transforms over a period of around 100 years or so to dependence on commerce and shipping. And this is seen in Boston, the largest city in British North America, in 1740, as it becomes an extremely important trade hub. In the mid-Atlantic region, we see New York, which had been a Dutch colony, as called New Amsterdam. It is sold to the British, and so it becomes a British colony. Again, amplified this quote, anyways, from the song, They Might Be Giants song, Istanbul, not Constantinople, sums it up well. Old New York was once New Amsterdam. Why they changed it, I can't say. People just liked it better that way. But keep in mind that we can say why it changed, because it went from being a Dutch colony to a British colony. And so instead of being named for Amsterdam in the Netherlands, they changed the name to New York, as in York, England. Anyways, New York is in a very good location to be a commercial and shipping center. They exported grain to the Caribbean and Southern Europe, and this made it kind of, again, New York is going to become one of the largest cities in North America at this time, or in British-held America at this time, because of its importance as a shipping center. In Pennsylvania, the colony develops as one for Quakers, but soon develops into another grain exporting colony with Philadelphia as its major commercial city. But as opposed to what we see in the southern colonies, South Carolina's slave agriculture and a lot of cash crops, Pennsylvania's grain is mainly produced by free family farmers, including many Germans who emigrate to the Americas. As far as French America, this is where we see some differences with the British, but we also see a few similarities. So the French are committed to missionary work, sort of like the Spanish were, and this is going to evolve their commitment to missionary work in the colonies. But French expansion is mainly driven by the fur trade, which resulted in, like we saw with the British fur trade, a depletion of natural resources, the beaver populations, deer populations. And as these populations depleted, we see more infighting between Native American groups and fighting between the French and Native Americans. The fur trade provided Amerindians with firearms, and that actually ended up increasing the violence of the wars they fought, as both sides now had these very damaging weapons. These kind of arming of Native Americans is going to also make it more difficult for Europeans to expand westward. It slowed the pace of European settlement. Now, as far as missionaries go, we do know that Catholic missionaries attempted to convert Native American people of French America. But as this kind of happens at first, and then it becomes more and more difficult, the Jesuits specifically turn their attention toward just these smaller French trading posts, trading settlements. These settlements depended on the fur trade, so they are very small and they grow very slowly. It's not like these big shipping hubs that we see in British America. Instead, places like Detroit and Milwaukee really develop as kind of small trading posts, and eventually develop into modern cities. The exception to this might be New Orleans, the French city on the mouth of the Mississippi River, because of its importance in trade. Because of the reliance of the French on Native American goods, we see somewhat of a cordial relationship between the two, and Native Americans actually were able to preserve a greater degree of independence in New France than they were, let's say, in British-held America or in New Spain or Brazil. Of course, the French began expanding rapidly, aggressively to the west and the south, and of course this brings them into conflict with not only Native Americans but with England. And so while these European countries are fighting wars on and off in Europe, they begin to spill over into the Americas. One such war is the French and Indian War, named because the English win, and so they name it after the losers in this war, the French. But Native Americans did fight on both sides. Anyways, the French are defeated in 1759, and basically what this means for the French is they leave North America. New France, which includes regions of Canada and the territory west of the Mississippi and much of the Midwest, is yielded to the English. And Louisiana, the land west of the Mississippi, is yielded to Spain. So everything east of the Mississippi basically becomes property of the British, and everything west, the property of Spain. That's it. Our next video will be on colonial expansion and conflict, which is the major section of the notes that I did not get to in class today.